I got the chance to screen the best of it, and I have to say it's very interesting, especially coming from I guess the dark and dirty world of professional gambling. I know with a lot of documentaries, there's some sort of tie with the director to a documentary. What tied you into this in the world of gambling?
I, I was a senior feature producer for TVG, a horse racing network, so I produced a lot of features.
Okay.
And I kept finding myself kind of drawn to the professional gamblers, especially in the mornings, because you saw these guys clocking horses. And then you'd see them in the afternoon step into the window that had minimum $1,000 wagers. And I started doing some horse player features. And then I started kind of going over to Vegas, and it just kind of took a long road, but I started meeting some people and opening up to the idea of doing a feature-length documentary.
So were these characters that you sought out after you decided you wanted to do the documentary, or were these people you met along the way?
Some of them I met along the way. The Shrink and Boston were two of the initial ones. And then when the incident happened, plot point, spoiler, but I met Dink and I've known of Len Banker, but I kind of met those two later. And Dink was like the easiest. I really tried to. I wanted to be able to shoot as much as possible, and I wanted to try to be intimate with the gambler, where they weren't thinking about crew and we could only be there for 3 hours and we were getting in their way. So, I bought the equipment, I bought a Prius, and I just planned on driving to Vegas a lot. And, quite often when I'd be shooting with Dink, especially on an NFL Sunday, we'd have breakfast together, lunch, and dinner, and I'd be there for like 12 to 14 hours.
Now, did you find yourself kind of, I guess, caught up in the momentum while they were as well? Like I know you see them making and placing bets. Did you ever have the urge to kind of get involved a little bit personally?
Well, I like football, and I during my time, not only at TVG but kind of researching, I'd spend enough time over in Vegas and when I go over there weekends and playing, but I found myself much more interested when I was with my buddies and I was able to focus and kind of watch games. But when I was filming with those guys, I was so worried about, the running out of battery or running out of this and just kind of getting a shot and make sure I'm not missing anything. And the other aspect with these guys, they're playing so many games.
Sure.
They're like going back and forth in some games. They're playing so many games. It's really hard. Outside of maybe like 1 or 2 days where Boston had a really big game where he needed a team, most of the times, they would have 50, 60 plays, and sometimes they'd have 70% on one side, 30% on the other. So it wasn't really a lot of moments where I was really caught up on just like one score because so many games are coming in, especially when they're playing college basketball season. They might be playing 60, 70 games in one day.
And I'm going to speak a little bit to the addiction here and some of the correlations behind some other professions. But one thing I noticed throughout, you have 4 different types of personalities that it kind of comes full circle in the end, where they have this one correlating factor, which is they all say they love it, but you highlight aspects that show that it's kind of killing them internally. You see how just how they're almost addicted to caffeine at times, and then you have a little shot of the Pepto right next to someone that's going through like a tough time. I mean, why do you think they love it so much, yet they put themselves through this type of torment?
The funny thing is the kind of the correlation I saw between when I was filming this and kind of my friends that are in the film business and writers and do a lot of editing. Both are kind of a solitary lifestyle. And I think writers are the same way. They say they love it, but I think the process sometimes is just you're almost miserable, and you feel a lot of anguish, despite it being a craft that you love. I think for these guys, though, um, I think part of their frustration you're seeing uh, is partially due to the technology, the way it's changed it for a sports gambler. It's much harder for them to get the best of it. I think they were a lot happier when they were winning a lot more in the late 80s and early 90s.
Sure, sure. Um, and speaking of that time, we also saw like a boom in the stock market and stockbrokers, and that was a time when they were thriving. I think nowadays we could say that playing the stock market is almost like a form of professional gambling in and of itself. And I saw a lot of the same stressors and identifying characteristics in these people that you would find in a stockbroker. Would you agree with that?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I don't think there's. I think day trading is another form of gambling. Um, I I think gambler and a day trader, they're both trying to do the same thing. They're trying to get the best possible price, and you're trying to control the outcome as much as you can. But as you saw that one scene in the film where Dink lost his cool, and it was really the only time he lost his cool, was frustration because he ended up losing the game, the first half, and the total, and he got such good numbers. Those guys pride themselves on getting a good number, and he got a good number, and because of a fluke play, he ended up losing everything and had a horrible day despite doing everything that he could possibly do on his end as a gambler.
Well, let's talk about the theme of the film overall that kind of falls in line with the title, the best of it. Now, maybe just to simplify things, I would take the understanding of that is being just a win is a win for them. Would you agree, or would you like to kind of elaborate?
A win is a win, but they feel in the long term, if they are getting the best of it, meaning if a number, if you're playing a favorite and they open as a pick'em, and you get it down as a pick'em, but it closes at 4, where a bettor is basically needing their team now to win by 5. If they feel like if they're getting the best number possible, the best total number or a side total on the team, they feel in the long term that they will win. So that's why they're so driven about getting the best number and the best of it, which the title comes from. I think 20 years ago, before the computers and before the non-bet screens, you could you were able to run up and down the strip and you were able to find different prices. It would be kind of like going around town and shopping for the best price. And now with the internet and kind of like with a car and just like everything, it's much harder to find a different price. Basically, all these sports books now basically move their lines with each other and they stay uniform. So if they want to get the best of the number, they're not able to shop as much, but they're having to predict where that number is going to go.
Now, there's also been a surge of online gambling, probably over the past decade, and one of the things I've noticed that's a major difference between these guys and just your average gambling addict or someone who just is a casual gambler is they are really playing the odds well. They've got a book full of stats. I mean, it almost is like they are stockbrokers themselves. And I keep making that reference, but that's one thing I just couldn't get away from throughout the film. I just felt like I was seeing stockbrokers the way they had just mapped things out.
They're mapping things out, and where they have a big edge over a recreational gambler. A recreational gambler is just playing with his local bookie or a site on the website, one sports book. A professional gambler, a lot of times he'll have a runner who basically is going from casino to casino looking for a price, and then they have their online apps. So basically they sometimes have anywhere from 10 and some of the bigger gamblers even 20, 25 different places they're able to bet through. So they're trying to get that number before it changes, because when wise guys start playing, numbers start to move, and you're always kind of looking for that sports book that maybe is a little slower on the take and still getting that best number. So I think that's the big difference with these guys, what you were talking about, but also that they just have a lot more shops to choose from and to bet from, which allows them to get a better number than the square gambler or the recreational gambler.
And also, there's a lot of hoops they have to jump through, really, for this. And I know, like, there's a lot of historical value when you're talking to some more of the seasoned professional gamblers. But one in particular, you introduced some ties to the mafia with some old school gambling. Were there any details that maybe you found that you left out in the documentary that you weren't able to kind of supplement?
There were maybe a couple. I mean, I think Lem was a lot more freely talking about it. You know, he talked about he has a scene in there where he talks about all the guys that were working for him, and they all had nicknames. And he ended up getting a call from a bookie that Memphis was going to be missing 3 starters. And back then, even in the 80s, you didn't have the internet. So this information was actually something that he could use to their benefit. So Lem was trying to get down as much as he could, and knowing that some of the East Coast shops wouldn't open for a while and they might have the information by then, he got down with a bookie in Minneapolis, and he ended up scoring at like 30,000, and the guy wasn't going to pay him, and so he called lefty Frank Rosenthal, who is portrayed and was inspired De Niro's character in Casino. And basically, they were, threatened to whack him. And I don't know how serious they are. And Lem likes to tell a tale, but he had the money in his bank account the very next morning.
Now, you mentioned he actually got a tip beforehand, and I know I keep kind of circling back to this, but I guess going with the stock market, that would be considered kind of insider trading, and it's a lot more regulated. Here, they have the freedom, if they get a tip like that, they can actually make a move on it, and they can profit from it. So there's a lot of allure to professional gambling versus going into something more regulated like the stock market.
Definitely. I mean, those guys had an edge. And, but back before the internet, those types of tips were a big deal. I found it interesting too that some of the guys, what they do is they would have some of their workers go that were also runners in the mornings go out to the airport, and then they would, back before 9/11, you had a lot more freedom to roam around an airport, and they would go on to planes that were coming in from Chicago and different cities to the sports page from that city, which gave them kind of a local edge on injuries and anything that's going on. It just shows you how different the times are now. With Twitter, you're lucky to get inside information that's going to hold for like 5 minutes.
Sure, and it's I guess it's a form of time traveling, if you will, because they're able to get that information a little bit early by going and getting those papers as they're released out of different time zones, and it kind of plays back to the Future 2 scenario where he's got the sports almanac, but they've got like a little bit of an edge with that, before the internet. So, I mean, I think that's just a really interesting aspect right there, just from that perspective alone.
Yeah, and Lem, I think Lem was one of the guys that used inside information better than anyone. He really took advantage. He at least allowed us, to tell 3 stories. He found out that when Hagler was fighting Hearns, that Hearns had a cut in his mouth 3 days before the fight, and it was too late. They already had people coming, and they didn't want to lose the money. So he basically knew the fight managers when he got this information of Hagler, and he called them and basically told them to go to Hearns' mouth because he has 3 stitches. And he ended up winning $100,000 on that fight.
Yeah, and there's so many interesting tales within this documentary. One thing I have to ask is with with the emergence of technology and the emergence of communication and that lack of that insider edge, uh, where do you think that these characters will go in the future? And do you think there's a future for professional gamblers?
I definitely think there's a future, and I think I was kind of exploring guys that were have gone through the eras, the older generation gamblers. Dink is starting to hang out with some younger gamblers that are all about numbers and analytics, and I think that's where it's going. I think you're also seeing syndicates more that can use the power of a powerful bankroll to have an edge over a regular gambler too. Because if you have a little more money and you have some more outs, a lot of them feel that they can predict. They basically can predict the market, and they're going to make money at arbitrage. So, like if the Yankees were a minus 120 favorite the night before, and they thought it could go to minus 150, they'll play like 50,000 on the Yankees at that 20, and then they'll come back and play the favorite at plus 150 the next day. If the Yankees win, they break even. If the underdog would win, they'd win 30 cents on the dollar. So if they're predicting the market right, they're not worried about losing any money. But again, it's predicting the market, and those times have changed so much where you just can't make the money they used to. I mean, that's Dink's big thing, and he talks about in the film. He wishes he would have bet more back when the going was good, because he's really just kind of, most seasons are a wash, and he's putting in a lot of long hours, and he's just not having the same results he used to.
So, if you were going to leave people with if one message from this documentary after seeing it, what would you like to convey to people? One overall theme or message?
I just when I would go to the racetrack with friends or go to Vegas for a weekend, everybody goes there with these great dreams, and I'm gonna basically pay for my trip. I'm gonna have some extra money in my pocket. But to be a professional gambler, you really have to be disciplined. You really need to be good with money management, and you can't let the highs and the lows get to you. You need to stay at middle ground, because it's just a grind. If you have that one season where you start to lose and then you start to chase money, bad things can happen. And I think this movie is the telltale that what a gambler is telling you, his bankroll, isn't necessarily what it really is, and that it's a hard way to make a living. It's a grind.
Well, Scott, I want to thank you so much for your time. We look forward to following up with you in the future once the documentary actually hits and starts being distributed. But thanks so much again. We appreciate your time.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's weird, I was with this film for so long. It's tonight at 9:00 it starts to be released, so it'll be kind of interesting to see how it does. I mean, I know a lot of people in the gambling community want to see it. It popped in the top 10 for a while in the pre-order charts on iTunes.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, we'll be sure to follow up with the interview and coverage as well. So thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I like FilmFat. I read you guys a lot. You're on my bookmark.
Oh, thanks so much. Appreciate that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
All right, you too.